Hello, and welcome to my cellar one more time. I'm going to skip around a little on some stuff tonight and see where it leads us. Okay, taking up the real world applications that I touched briefly on, this individual says D&D has taught him. I don't ever say there aren't things that D&D can teach you, or playing D&D, or any role-playing game. I'm not going to be a snob and say only D&D. Case in point, several years ago at Gen Con, when it was in Indy, and Watsy was having a big do at one of the hotels, a block or two, a couple blocks away. So I thought, well, it was all about D&D. So I thought, well, I'll crash it. And, I hadn't been specifically invited, but I was involved. Anyway, and I met this young man. And he, figured out, whatever, maybe I was wearing a name badge. I don't know. Anyway, he wanted to tell me what D&D had done for him in the real world. And he went on to say how he had been very introverted, very shy, very, geeky, nerdy, off by himself, not a goth, but that. And then he discovered role-playing games one summer. And he had, so I asked him, I said, well, how's it going now? And he goes, well, didn't know you could have this many girlfriends. And he was the vice president of his class. So, tabletop role-playing can pull people out of their shell, can make them more confident, can help them discover abilities, natural leaderships, inquiring minds, no doubt about it. Those things can happen, and I'm proud to have been part of that. Now, this individual goes on to game design for one. Okay, you've got to be methodical, you've got to be precise. It all has to come out. The rooms, the corridors got to line up when you're done, and you need to have a checklist of what you're trying, So okay, that's a good skill to learn. And then he makes an interesting question. He says, "Are you playing?" Okay, the old ubiquitous quotes. When you're designing an elaborate stronghold for your high-level character, perhaps. Well, what is playing exactly? And I had occasion today to reassess once again what playing is. The occasion was my great-grandson's 3rd birthday, Tyson. And we went to their house, their new house. They've only been in it a couple of months. And there were about, oh Lord, must have been 12 kids there at the most at one time. There's a little coming and going. Anyway, there was a good dozen kids there, ranging in range from probably 12 to 2. There was a couple of infants, but I'm not counting them. And that was the noisiest damn 3 hours I spent in a long, long, long time. And after the first 40 minutes of constant noise, I found myself getting annoyed, and then I realized what it was. It was annoying me. It was children having pure, unalloyed fun. There was a bouncy house. They had a snow cone machine. They had a cotton candy machine, and it was just unalloyed fun. Kids being kids, running up and down the hill in the back and bouncing on the house until there was too many of them in there. We had to shove them all out while the house reinflated. Just having fun. So the next 2.5 hours, it was just like, okay, I just kind of tuned it out. But what is playing? We play games. And sometimes I think it's important to remind ourselves that we are playing. And what is play? Play is non-productive activities, or it is productive if it stimulates your mind or whatever. But so what is play? Activity that doesn't earn you recompense? Are you playing to answer the question, are you playing while you're designing the elaborate dungeon? Yes, you are. You're playing when you're with the other 5 people in the campaign, having a good time in that, in a different format, but you're still playing. Just like when we were all 6 and 7 and just ran around screaming like crazy people, eating snow cones and birthday cake and stuff. Play is play is play. There's a stigma about men admitting that, for instance, the men that collect tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of trains and build elaborate layouts that take up half the basement, and then many of them don't like to hear people say, he's downplaying with these trains, but he is. But there are some that don't like that term. I don't play with them. I just run them to keep them lubricated. And, okay, whatever. But there's a thing about guys don't like to admit they're playing. Fishing recreationally, that's an activity that gives pleasure, that doesn't produce anything. Now, I'm not talking about competitive fishing, all right, because that's a whole different ballgame. Just like I saw 2 20-year-old high school students playing for $100,000 in Madden football and esports. That's play too. They just get paid a lot to play. It's grown men in the major leagues playing baseball. That's the term we use. Play. We play war games, so we can be dead serious if we're playing simulation games. We can play miniatures, though again, we can be dead serious during the pursuit of that activity and trying our best to succeed and win. We play when we sit down at the table and role play. Play, if maybe RPGs have taught us that play is not something we have to think that we've abandoned after we've grown up. I don't know. Another thing that role playing can teach is a certain ability to pick up on social cues, more diplomatic behaviors. All right, that's enough serious crap. We had a house rule about character deaths. After 3 days, characters were permanently dead and lost a constitution point for every day they were dead. Well, I'm not. I'm okay. I guess you're talking now about messing around with resurrections. I never got into that a whole lot. Okay. I'll be honest. Now, I haven't looked up the rules in some time. Often a relative would come claim belongings. The relative had a striking resemblance and could step in and replace the dead character. Yeah, right. A well-known ploy. Jolly Blackburn in the Knights of the Dinner Table took it to the extremes when Brian, the wizard in the group, claims to have nephews in that training, and they all know these families. He takes it to the nth degree. But there is a lot of ways. Gary was just, you go around the corner and there's your twin brother. You're back in the game. I mean, we in the early days we did that a lot, especially if we were playtesting. Um, and I'll be telling you straight up, I never, except for the very first time, ever started people out at zero. Um, I did the first time, and then when had to have people coming back in with new characters having died out, etc., along the way, and had some people in the party who'd actually made fourth or even fifth level at that time. Um, and it didn't seem wasn't going to be any fun to come back at a first. So they were willing to take their chance with an average die and come back as no, there were no ones, no sixes, but they were willing to do that, and it kind of got them a place in the group that okay, they slipped a little, but they weren't completely noobs that had to be protected. Um, I've known lots of DMs that have done the same thing. I enjoy playing low level characters because you have to use your wits. I do. They're fun. In my Wheel of Blame, they're like third, fourth levels for the most part. I think the cleric's a fifth. Excuse me, and that gives him two first level slots and two second level slots. Um, but I think you have to be much craftier and wittier to survive when you can't just wade in like an armored car, slashing and bashing and throwing fireballs or burning oil, Molotov cocktails, whatever. Um, but whatever it takes to get back in, whatever the GM and the tables were happy with, that's cool. Now, I guess, the constitution point for every day they've been dead means that after 18 days being dead, there's no way ever they can come back, not resurrection or anything. And I'm all for that. Start a new one. Tell us about my most recent long running campaign. I haven't had a long running campaign in decades. Um, and my design and prep philosophy. All right. Well, I've been writing since 2006. I've written nine, probably nine adventures, and am slowly buffing them up to be, to. I wrote them for myself before Eldritch, and then once we formed Eldritch, then I filled them out to become full-fledged adventures, not just basic outlines that I had written and self-published. Um, excuse me, getting dry. If you weren't watching last week, I like this guy. He's a nice guy, real honest. Whoops, I know I'm always backwards. Stack it, look it up. They're great. They hold 2 cans of beer, big tall bottle of flavored water like sparkling ice or something like that. Tall or energy drink cans. You just fold the top down. Keeps it nice and cold. Anyway, back to where was I? Going to get sidetracked here. All right. My longest running campaign, if I don't know if it's really a campaign, but I've been doing the Wheel of Blame for a couple 3 years now, and it's always got a changing cast. Except some of the people have played in it 6 or 7 times because it's always different. It's always the same setting. It's just the puzzles change every time around, and with it is the ultimate railroad ahead, 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 and you go from one encounter or one puzzle or what. Look up the game on my YouTube channel, and it'll tell you the format, how it's played. And you could now I've changed it to where you could be outdoors doing something, complete it, and all of a sudden find yourselves underwater. Not drowning, but or in the completely in the dark underground. Because the whole wheel's magical thing, so I can have any environment I want. So depending upon the items, etc. So I've honed and refined that. Everything used to be up above ground, outdoors, if you will, or in a town. Now I've gone completely whole hog. Role playing, any environment and role playing you might find on the wheel, including I'm thinking about taking them to various planes of hell once in a while. I get the cards from the players that would justify that. Design and prep. Well, the wheel of blame is everybody gives me 2 items just before the game starts. I sit down for 5 minutes, read through them, work out what I'm going to do, and I use all those items in the upcoming adventure, except I disguise them, I distort them, whatever. So I don't do a lot of prep. Now, when I'm writing an adventure, writing a module, that's a different story. I sketch out in my mind what's the tension here, what's going on. Snake Riders of the Arredondo. That's one that's been published by Eldridge. The premise was that this really high power circle of magic users has discovered something in a formerly lost continent after the destruction, etc. Anyway, you're transported there to go up, find out, take care of it, see what it is. So, okay, I got the mission, I got the goal. Everything else just kind of falls into place for me, and I understand it's different for everybody. But my creative style is such that I get an idea about, ooh, that'd make a neat setting, and I file it away in the back of the head, and I call that my percolator. And I got 4 or 5 different adventures right now floating around back there. Some very close to being fully fleshed, and others all capable of being fleshed. And I just kind of know when one of them's ready. But that's my very personal style and the way my brain works. But you can never prep too much, but no matter how much you prep, it'll never be enough. No matter how well you think you got tonight's adventure ready, figured out, those guys will ask a question, find something, make a determination falsely, and just derail the whole thing. It happens all the time. So you want to be as prepped as you can be, as long as you accept the fact that you probably won't be prepped enough. I'm with you on the classes. I like to keep it pared down to 4 basic archetypes of fighter, magic user, crusader, rogue. Well, I'm not sure why. Yeah, I'm not criticizing. Crusader, I'm guessing, is a more capable cleric. That would be the only reason to do that, and that's just a buff. And that's why one of the reasons I don't like the proliferation of beyond magic user, cleric, fighter. Now they call it a rogue. All the rest are variations on a theme. Druid just follows a different path. What they are able to do is, if you parachuted, back in the Second World War, when guys would get shot down in the Pacific and parachute into a formerly semi-deserted isle with just natives living on it, they thought the Zippo lighter was the greatest thing since sliced coconuts. So magic is magic, depending upon where it goes, whatever. And we're all in it's a fantasy, whole fantasy game to begin with. So I see them all as variations on a theme. And we'll talk about more on that. He said, my favorite way of modifying the wizard is to give him a different spell list. You can be a wizard, a druid, a necromancer. Yeah, that's fine. It was always kind of understood that certain spells were meant for certain people. Now, we didn't have necromancers, okay? We didn't deal with, raising the dead and what have you, dealing with the dead, controlling the dead. That's the over influence of crappy movies. I fudge to improve drama or the story. Thumbs up. I strongly believe that the dice are a tool to add to the fun, not rule the game. Yes, my players know I do it, and they're fine with it because they trust me. Yes, trust, trust, trust. Also, I've noticed that when the players are just rolling terrible due to lady luck, they feel much better when the bad guys are rolling poorly too. I'll see you at Game Hole. Yeah, that's where I'm playing. I guess I'm going to be at Game Hole. Not been invited by Alex yet, or haven't seen a guest list. It was always kind of understood that I was going. Thanks for the wonderful advice on game conflict resolution. The neutral ground idea is well reasoned. I agree to put people at ease in a rational state of mind. Also, if you feed them food they like, they'll be much mellower. That's why I say taco stands or pizza joints. Or if you got a great Philly cheesesteak place, you understand what I'm saying. I appreciate you indicating that whatever outcome it is, the players and the DM choose to decide, and DM's choice to decide if they agree upon a ruling and continue playing, or if they're not satisfied with it, someone's unhappy. That why participate the game meant to be enjoyed, exactly played. Play shouldn't be play should not cause grief. Mental, not a tiny bit. Oh crap, but not cast you into a funk or feel like you're being conspired against. Um, Unresolved player conflicts and disputes can really doom any gaming group. You're right. That's the chief cause of gaming groups blowing up. He'll use my neutral ground next time he has to handle conflict at the table. Well, neutral ground puts everybody. I don't know if it puts everybody at ease or it puts everybody a little uneasy, but I think the point is that it makes everybody kind of feel rough of the same about being in a known place. You're not asking them to go down the alley, knock on the third door, and give the password Muncie. But the local watering hole pizza joint, depending upon the age of the players, pizza joint, taco joint, whatever, sandwich shop. Okay. Steve McQueen, Bullet, but with orcs. Chase scenes. Do they work in tabletop RPGs? My friends hate them in movies. Watching paint dry for them. Do you indulge in chase scenes? Would you make them fun? Well, if you are saying if you are assuming the chases are fast, no, I don't do them at all. You can't simulate that. Pretty soon, everybody's breathing funny at the table because you're all pretending to be going fast. Now, if they don't have to be fast, yeah, I do tracking. I love to do tracking stuff and have them. I throw lots of clues around in the outdoors or underground. Fewer underground, of course, but you can do that. You're getting a clue after clue after clue and realizing that somebody's following you. Yeah, it builds up to a natural tension level that can be kind of fun, but it's really hard to ramp up adrenaline when you're not doing anything that would normally raise adrenaline. Now, if you buy a bunch of foam swords, sit each other across from 3-foot tables on 3-foot tables, and the players whap each other with these foam swords vigorously, as hard as they can during the whole combat. See where I'm going with that? No, tracking's fun. Being tracked is even more fun because you can make them. Oh God, it's so easy to make a group paranoid. There should be rules against it. Want to ask this question for a long time. Can you give us a definitive answer on exactly how magic users obtain their spells? Do they find them while adventuring, exchange with other wizards, or just pick them out of the player handbook when they level up? All right. In the Dying Earth, which is where this comes from originally, there are spells that have been rediscovered from a long time ago that are so hard to think about. They take up so much of your brain power to put them in your trained mind to memorize that they simply know that if they say these syllables in this thing, whatever, wave their hands in a certain way and stick a piece of uh, um, um, milkweed fluff up their right nostril. They find them. That used to be huge in the early days, finding spells. Because forget what's in the player's handbook. I really wish that straight players couldn't ever see the list and just find them as they go along and go, wow, what's this do? Used to be you found a scroll, then you had to figure out what it did. And that meant read magic, or whatever. And you hoped it wasn't a curse or had exploding runes. And then you make the decision. Am I going to put this into my spell book? Or am I going to take it with and read it out when I'm, in vile duress? And either one is going to consume it. It'll make what's on there disappear because that was the dying Earth's magical physics. You found a new one. You either copied it into your book or you took it out and you threw it. Either one consumed it. Into your book meant you could memorize it for another time, another use. Having it on the scroll meant you always had it with you. We used to carry, finding scrolls was huge for low-level clerics and magic users because you had so many spell slots, but every scroll you had was like an extra spell slot. One time only, granted. But if you were entitled to use, three ones, two twos, and a three, okay, whatever. And you had 6 spells on scrolls, you had almost, you just boosted your armory by 100%. And by having them on scrolls, you had less of the, well, what do I memorize for tomorrow? Well, maybe I just won't need something or other tomorrow. What do I always need? And then we house ruled various things from there on. I did more than Gary, obviously. Um, I've been watching the interesting conversations on a couple of the Facebook threads having to do with rules as written. And if you go back and you look at first edition, every single introduction says essentially the same thing. Change it if you want to. You being the collective you, meaning if your group's into changing it, change it. These are guidelines. They're not chiseled in stone. They're not written in the sky. They're guidelines. All right, where was I before I got off on that rant? Bullet. All right. How do they get them to their level up? All right. Here's something I do that's very different. I don't consider clerics to have spells or crusaders or whatever the hell you use for the guy who's basically the medic. I don't consider them to have spells. I consider them to be able to say prayers. They can say so many prayers of such and such a potency per day. In my wheel game, the cleric has 2 firsts and 2 seconds. And I'm toying with the idea of giving them a scroll, an offensive scroll. Not a mortar platoon, but maybe a medium machine gun. In terms of efficiency, they can exchange spells. Yeah, you can trade them. Yeah, but using or copying uses them up. That's why rings and staves and whatever containing spells are so wonderful, and that's why it should be expensive to make one for the advantage they give you. And the more advantage, DMs I'm speaking to here, the more advantage, the more it should cost. But we were all about, yeah, sure, if you want to try and enchant this or curse that or whatever, sure, go ahead and just give us lots of gold. And DM would think up what he had to do, go sit naked in the rain on top of the mountain in February, whatever. And yeah, you could do it. Go ahead. Why not? It's magic. Rules as written is strictly a concept if you're going to play in a competition. That way, everyone knows how things will work. They're good for that and nothing else. Let's see. And when you level up, there's been some interesting controversy on how getting new spells when you level up. I believe in the early days with playing with Gary, and I know that's the way I did, you had to find it or get a chance to buy it or something like that. You couldn't just sit down with the book and say, I'm going to learn this. Spells had to be, they had to come from some physical reality in the game. And that goes along with the fact that I don't train when you level up. The clerics don't go off to do another novitiate or something like that. I consider, particularly in the case of the clerics, by the time they accrue the points, they know the prayers. They're just not capable of using them until, ta-da, they reach that level of sanctity, and now they find they can. That's the way it works for me anyway. Magic is how well you can read it, how well you can understand it, because I always felt that magic had its own language. Anyway, I'll add the barbarian to our basic AD&D classes. Not a fan of other new class. Unnecessary and bogs down our game. Well, here again, I confess complete and total ignorance of what makes the barbarian special. Why is he different from a fighter? And fighting man being an old archaic term, fighter, because fighter can be any sex. If and this happened a lot in the early days, we had people that played fighters as Conan, sort of dumb. Gary would not let you do something or know something that your character's stats wouldn't have accommodated. If you had a 9 intelligence, which is base average, below, bottom average, if you had a 9 intelligence, then you couldn't grasp instantly complex something that would require a 15. That's how I learned to play. Don't know why. My guess is that a barbarian is simply a way to beef up in certain ways a starting character, buff them up without any good logic to justify it. But that's just it. Just me. Dearest Timist. Difficulty room. PCs find a room where orcs or monsters are on the ceiling like it's the floor. PCs remain on their floor. Room dimensions are such that the opponents can engage in battle, but their legs are out of easy reach. What advantages and disadvantages should one apply to such a complex melee? Well, I've done that a couple of times. Everybody's on the ceiling. I hadn't thought to put them in a low enough room that they could, beat on each other. Advantages. If you had really great abs and you could hold yourself up there in a jackknife position until somebody walked underneath you, it'd be a hell of a surprise. Need some enormous abs, maybe an 8-pack. Disadvantages. All the blood would rush to your head, making it harder and harder for you to hit anything. How to get around that? A magic belt, magic boots, magic shoes, magic ring that negates all those effects. But think about it. Walking around on the ceiling without anything without wearing a G-suit, you're gonna pass out within seconds. Well, a couple of minutes, maybe, if you're in really good shape. Certainly be a disadvantage to find yourself upside down, and pretty soon you're just hanging from the floor. That's what you'd be doing. Now, if you want to go in and say, okay, you all feel like you got normal gravity, hey, it's your world, your dungeon, your adventure. Go for it. That might be something to do in a crashed spaceship or something of that nature. That might be a lot of fun to do, as a matter of fact. Certainly be a complex melee. And again, the legs being out of easy reach, for the most part, is a non-starter if you're using points as the ability to avoid the fatal blow. Now, if the people hanging upside down after the second or third melee round, they'd start losing the ability to hit. When they were hit, it would hurt more. I always try to approach it from a real life thing. If it was a metal ceiling and you had magnetic boots, what would be the problem? Now, if you're talking post-apocalyptic or sci-fi, where you can fool with gravity fields and that, well, all bets are off, obviously. Okay. Now, this is a long, weird question, and I decided, well, I ought to address it a little bit. I've been playing catch up on some of your past episodes. What's the deal with Koontz? I'm assuming he's meaning Rob Koontz. In one episode you mentioned his writing needed to improve, and his conjecture on Arneson was skewed. Then in another, you hoped his litigation with the Gygax estate was successful. Possibly sarcasm. No, actually it wasn't. You know, when you have people you don't like, don't like them for different reasons to different degrees. I don't like the widow most out of everything going on up there. I don't like her the most. I'll agree his work on artisan read like a French political treaty by Rousseau, but I think he is trying to make a logical argument that artisan created the theory of the mind experience with Blackmore. The conjecture is that D&D as we know it was birthed out of Blackmore and Gary's interactions with artisan, and not some other system like chainmail which influenced. What's my take on Kuhn's? Well, first off, my take on his conjecture, if indeed this is a fair assessment of his conjecture, um, I know for a fact that Dave created Theater of the Mind because he said to Gary and his friends, "All right, now sit down and we're going to play a game." And he could just as easily say, "Close your eyes." All right, so I'm sure of that, and that came out of Bronstein. Okay, that came out of that. Okay, uh, but you know, you're splitting hairs when you try to take apart the chili. What went into it, and depends on how you make it, which spices, you know, whatever. But that's kind of what you're trying to do. Um, you're trying to deconstruct another person's creative process. And I don't have the formal training of psych or soc or anything along those lines. I'm certain that without Gary's input, without Gary's drive, without Gary's system of, oh, all right, let's see how we can make this into a game, it never would have happened. I also believe that Dave brought an idea, a concept, if you will, down to Lake Geneva, physically or metaphorically, and that then was seized upon by Gary. They then got, you know, hey, I'll write up rules for this. Oh, okay, fine. Because Gary was great at writing and codifying rules back then. He was one of the best. I won't say that there haven't been other people since that are every bit or better. And uh, Dave was not. Um, my issues with Rob came from deadlines missed. Um, what was finally turned in late was often very slapdash. Rob did not have a lot of formal education. Rob got a lot of his education self-taught out of books. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Look at Lincoln. However, like particularly one other friend I had, um, he used to use words that were almost right, not quite, but you could tell he was on the beam. So I had a lot of those I had to puzzle out. But hey, there were other writers that were like that too. With Rob, it was mostly deadlines and mostly deadlines and a certain in later years a certain I thought a certain overly inflated sense of worth on what he had done in that because he hadn't proved it with anything he had done. Now, when he wins the lawsuit against the widow, he will have established that, okay, this is what I did. This is what I created. It's a very minute part of the overall pantheon of first edition or OD&D. But it is a legitimate part of it that he created. In some cases, he was given carte blanche by Gary to create. Take this wing that we used to have something in and put something else in and change it. And so, yeah, he did. Now, at the time, as in most collaborations that happen spontaneously, nobody wrote down, oh, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that. As for specific features of various Greyhawk rooms, I have very little knowledge of that, but I do know from Gary's admission, hearsay, that yes, oh yeah, I gave that to Rob to do. I know that Rob ran adventures when Gary couldn't, so that the campaign kept going. I just had problems with him meeting deadlines for publication. I really wanted to like the guy. All right. Now, this is the last one and the last comment. I'm not even sure what the hell it means, but I'm going to argue with it anyway. First off, the person claims to be woke. Well, that's not anything I would lead off with. Woke. I think woke is just people that have been mentally slapped to see that things they've been doing all their life could be done differently. I haven't been doing most of those things all my life, so I don't need to be slapped. Race as class. No. Race as class? No. I'm going to be the best elf I can be, which is going to give me a little affinity for magic and some super fast dexterity and stuff for fighting and an eye with a bow. And basically, it's going to give me a buff character to start with. I'm going to play a dwarf. Fine, dwarves. I never, from the very first, I realized that the restriction on various races for levels was bull. Never meant to be adhered to, because in my experience in Lake Geneva, my lowly third level fighter all of a sudden became like a 7th level lord or something like that. And supposedly dwarves were limited to 5th level myrmidons. I don't understand playing race as a class unless you're trying to buff a PC by giving them racial bonuses. If that's your bag, fine. I certainly don't understand it. I'm going to be the best dwarf I can be. I'm going to be the best human I can be. Holy shit, there's a lot of ways to be a good human. I don't like half this, half that, half anything. I used to be queasily okay with half elves. Nope. And I've always found the idea of half orcs abhorrent. You're a fighter. You're a cleric. You're a jack of all, every little of this, little of that, called a rogue. Or you dabble in the arts and you're a magic user. What the hell else do you need? You want to be simple? There you go. You can play. You can be any kind of fighter you want to be. You can be any kind of dabbler you want to be. You can pray to any god you want to pray to in any manner you want. You can make squirrels eat ice cream before you slaughter them in an offering to Anook, your tree god. Anything you want. Don't do racist class. All right. I will be running. I'm gonna load them on this weekend. I will be running at least 3 and probably 4 games for North Texas Role-Playing Game Convention virtually. I really, really, really would love to go down. And I've had my 2 and everything, but I'm still uncomfortable on sitting on my fanny in an airplane wearing a mask for all that period of time because I've got a beard. And they get damned uncomfortable with a beard. Pretty soon your beard becomes moist. So I wear the mask when I go out to the grocery, etc., but 2-3 hours on an airplane. I do hope, as I said earlier, I do hope to be going to Game Hall. And I'll be playing, sign up for North Texas for the virtuals. The Wheel of Blame. Let's see, what else was I going to tell you about? Stackets, those are really cool. I guess that's it. So I'll just have to say Dodada Go Be. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. PSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.